Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, Ticarta. So today I'm going to be making a micarta-like material for knife handles that I'm calling Ticarta. We're doing it as kind of a goof, but if it all works out in a succeeding video, I'll go ahead and make a knife with the material that we're making today. So if you're not familiar with micarta, it is a composite material composed of resin and layers of cloth, or sometimes paper or fiberglass. Most knife handles, though, are either made from linen or canvas micarta. It was originally invented like 100 years ago, maybe, by Westinghouse Corporation, I believe, and was one of the earliest kind of plastic type materials. I think it was originally intended as an electrical insulator, but like I say, custom knife makers have taken it over as a popular handle material, and it really is fantastic for handle making. But what are we doing today? Ticarta. When you machine material, the excess chips are called swarf. Now, my milling machine has no enclosure, so all this crap ends up on the floor and I have to sweep it up and dispose of it. I've been milling a lot of titanium recently while working on my new folder, the Tactics Armory X. Anyway, I had a lot of nice titanium piling up on the floor and it seemed like a shame to just dump it. So, let's make some, floor carta, swarf carta, crap carta? Well, I thought Ticarta had a better ring to it. So, basically what I've done is gather up all this swarf. Now, in addition to the titanium, there's some aluminum in there, there's some steel, just general crap off the floor. Aluminum's fine, but I don't want a bunch of steel in there because some of it could potentially rust. So, once I gathered it up, I ran a magnet through it until I felt confident that virtually all the steel was gone, leaving only titanium and aluminum, plus a few bits and pieces of other assorted plastic and other junk just to give it a little spice. So what I'll do is mix fiberglass resin with my titanium aluminum mix and cure it between very flat aluminum plates. I'll use some scrap pieces of 0.25 inch thick micarta to establish a nice flat even piece of material so that the two plates are exactly the same distance apart throughout the entire piece of what will end up being this little billet of micarta. Fiberglass resin tends to get all over the place, so I'm covering the plates with plastic wrap. The Ticarta, or whatever you want to call this stuff, itself will be contained in a Ziploc bag. I'll begin by mixing the fiberglass resin per the instructions. The one thing you want to do when mixing resin is not to mix it in a wax cup. That wax can get into the resin and weaken the material. Now I'll mix in a pigment to blacken the resin. I'm using what's called furniture powder, but this is basically just lamp black, more or less pure carbon. The same thing that's been used in traditional artists' oil paints and all kinds of other tints for that matter for a very long time. You could buy the same basic material and it would be sold as pigment for paint and all kinds of other things. So despite being an ancient pigment, it's great for this sort of project. It's really stable, it doesn't have any solvents in it, and it's easy to work with. I want a pretty stout coloration here because if I color it too thinly, it won't show up strongly and form a strong color contrast in the material. Now I'll start sifting in the metal chips. I'm going fairly slowly and letting them settle into the resin, hopefully without sucking a bunch of air into it. Now you're going to get some air in homemade micarta no matter what, but no need to make things worse. I'm going to agitate it a bunch and try and get those bubbles to settle up to the top. The more I can agitate as opposed to stir, the fewer air bubbles. In a perfect world, I'd have some kind of mechanical agitator that would really get them out. But let's not get silly here. And then I'll dump it into the Ziploc sandwich bag. The reason for the sandwich bag is to contain the material. If you don't, you'll just squeeze it all over when you crank down on these plates, and it'll just come gooshing out all over the place. I keep the bag just barely cracked so that if there's any excess, it'll flow out and the clamping force will produce a nice, flat, even piece of material. We leave it to cure for a few hours, and here's how it comes out. So you can cut it on a bandsaw if you want, but eventually all that titanium is going to trash your bandsaw blades. It will work though if you're doing small batches of it. So here we are with a couple of scales ready to install on a knife. I'll add a link in the cards to this video in the next week or two when I make a knife with this material. Let's try again, this time with a different color. In this case, we'll go with a green base. Here I'm using a completely different kind of pigment. These blue and yellow pigments that I'm mixing to form green are intended for use with guitar lacquers, but I've used them before with epoxy and other resins, and they don't seem to affect the material. Otherwise, we're not doing anything different from the first batch, just a different pigment. And here's the result of batch number 2. Just for yucks, let's repeat the process once again, but this time with a completely different material. Still crap off the floor from underneath the CNC mill, but I recently made an assembly board from HDPE plastic on my Tormach CNC mill. In the process, I produced a fair amount of plastic swarf. Still crap off the floor from underneath the mill, just different crap. Seems like it might make for another cool material. HUD Picarta? Yeah, I don't think so. Plascarta? Okay, let's stick with that. Same procedure as before. Of course, it came off the floor, so there was some cleaning and straining involved, but no pigment this time. The natural tan color of the resin should give us a little bit more of an organic appearance here. In this case, I'm doing the mixing in the bag. The HDPE is really light and those chips are much larger than the titanium, so I felt it wouldn't pour as well as the titanium did. Again, doing plenty of agitation, trying to get the air bubbles to rise to the surface. After a few hours of curing, here's what we've got. Now, after I've chopped these things up, I'll take some of the scrap pieces and grind a little bevel in, and we'll see what we're really looking at. Here's the black Ticarta, and here's the Plascarta. Next week, as I said, we'll put one on an actual knife and see what we get. So I hope you enjoyed these projects. You know, the nice thing about this sort of project is that unlike making a full knife, this is something you can really get done in an afternoon. Make them, put them on the shelf, and then you've got some kind of unique material that nobody else has ever used or made. Put your own material in it, your own little spin on it, and then you got something that you can use later on to make a really cool knife. Thanks for watching, guys. If you feel like you got something out of this video, don't forget to subscribe. Also, click on the link to Patreon for a great way to give back to the channel. Plus, check me out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Links in the description. If you want something sharp and pointy, maybe a gift for yourself or one of the cooler people in your life, check out my Tactics Armory website and pick up one of our tactical or outdoor knives. And finally, if you want to learn to make Hamones or Japanese swords, check out WalterSorrellsBlades.com, where you can find videos about how I make Hamones, as well as forging, mounting, polishing, and fittings for Japanese swords. Thanks, and see you soon.